All right, everybody. Did you get your luggage? Did you get your carry on only, please? We're traveling lightly here. And although we'll be dealing with some potentially heavy topics, it should fit inside a carry on dimensions.
You're really working that metaphor for all
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
worth
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, go
Beat
for
it
it.
into the ground, my friend.
Snap that thing shut and strap it on your shoulder and let's get going.
Let's get going. Seat back in the upright and locked position. Okay. So yeah, just because we were talking about this metaphor of unpacking, and you had mentioned in the previous session, all right, you could unpack a word, you could unpack a phrase, you could unpack a verse, and that could be unpacked for a long period of time. As I think you said, a semester worth, just in a word or a phrase. And what you end up with or what you unpack depends, it seems to me, because I've been able to take or experience the Gita with different teachers in different places, and it seems to really matter who's doing the unpacking, who's who I'm talking to, or who's talking to me rather. And I'm talking to you. So, how are you unpacking this?
Very carefully.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Listen, Jules, like those books, this is not a virtual, thing. It's a
Mhm.
real library of books, right?
With
There's about
words in them.
100 different versions of the Bhagavad Gita, without exaggerating, 100 different editions of the Gita back there. There's an environmental Bhagavad Gita. There's an interfaith Bhagavad Gita. There's a Bible comparative Bhagavad Gita. There's an anti-Semitic Gita that comes from 1800s French by a guy named Bernouf, who was looking at words like Aryan and
Hmm.
translating them in a very different way. You have editions of the Gita that are for business people. Gita in the boardroom. So kinds of editions of the Gita there. So you're absolutely correct. Depending on who's doing the unpacking, you know, the clothing you're going to get out of that suitcase is going to be different.
Hmm.
People look at the Gita as literature, as a work of Sanskrit literature. Other people as a work of poetry, classic poetry. It has been the Bible of Hinduism for thousands of years. You can look at it as Hindu mythology. You can see it as the universal wisdom text. So depending on who's doing it, if a historian will talk about the Gita in a very different way from a philosopher, say, and a philosopher will talk about the Gita very differently from a yoga teacher. So it really does depend on who's doing the explanation. Um, is it real history? I mean, is this something that actually happened? Well, there's evidence of that. We mentioned last time that you can, take a train from Delhi and visit the battlefield. And there is much evidence that Krishna is a historic person, that he's not just myth, but was a person. Now, is Krishna the supreme being? That's a different matter altogether. And I think you and I have talked about this before. It almost doesn't matter. I
Mm.
can't go so far as to say it doesn't matter at all
Right.
because I'll get excommunicated by my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
devotee colleagues and they'll want me to turn in my neck beads and everything like that. But in the sense that it's a multi-dimensional universe, it's a
Mm.
very big universe out there that can accommodate many kinds of truths. So, because some people believe in the literalness of the Gita and other maybe just from a metaphorical position, doesn't diminish the value of its teachings.
Hmm.
I've kind of, you know, lightened up about this myself over the last 50 years of studying the Gita. In the beginning, when I was a Ute, when I was a youngin',
Yeah.
it was this is it, dude. You take this or be here, be square.
Hmm.
It is Krishna. uh, you know
Hmm.
I mean, that's fine, when you're 19 years old or whatever. um, I think I've evolved a bit since then. And it's important to recognize that for us to make our contribution to the world, you don't have to own the table. It's enough to just have a seat at that table. It's an honor to have a seat at that table. So we're coming at this, or I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who has evolved in his thinking
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
the Bhagavad Gita. It's not as important for me now as it used to be that students coming to a class like this end up, card carrying, mantra chanting, dyed in the wool, Krishnites. That
Hmm.
if somebody wants to do that, well, that's fine, but it's not required. The Gita stands on its own. Its contributions are universal.
Yeah. And you said like who's unpacking it, and thank you for kind of clarifying your position, but also kind of how the Gita can be on its own. And it has been claimed by many groups, and yet no group has exclusivity over the interpretation, contextualization, and application of the Gita. So it's a nice reminder. So thank you for that. And perhaps it's also helpful for our talk if I put a little bit of my unpackingness and where I'm coming from, because you said as a yoga teacher or as a yoga student, for me, first and foremost, essentially, when I say that, is as a person who's trying to use yogic techniques often, although the techniques I use come from many different places, but yogic techniques to become a better person, let's say. And I don't mean it in the sense of a cliche, higher sense of self that I would like to reflect in the world, although perhaps that is part of it. I've experienced a lot of suffering in different ways and forms. And to the extent possible, I would like to stop making the mistakes that cause me to endure suffering in the past. And I'm also very interested in sharing those things that worked for me with people who are interested in a similar idea. Like there are so many things that we can't control, and there are some that we seem to think that we cannot, but actually might be within our grasp. And the Bhagavad Gita has been a text that I have been able to glean a lot of practical knowledge that has helped me to kind of figure out, okay, not only who am I, but what can I do? And how can I share that in a way, because of the seat that I have at the table, as you said. I'm sitting at the table, we're having a talk, and I really like to talk to other people. And sometimes I like to talk about the Bhagavad Gita as a way to liberate from just some kind of suffering that happens every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this other thing going to happen where enlightenment comes about? It seems to be as the exception instead of the rule. But why not? Why you don't have to take it off the list? It could happen.
Right. It's just not guaranteed when you sign up for this course.
Yeah. I
Don't
mean,
expect
no refunds if you don't get liberated.
it. That's right.
Um, but it is our hope that through these conversations, ideas start to come up and you start to have these conversations and talks with other peoples, because as Shandas used to say, he would say like the teacher is a rough gemstone and is polished by their proximity to students, let's say in this, but to kind of flip it, that usually the student is the one who is polished, but actually we are polishing ourselves, whoever we may be, through our conversations, through our talk.
Shamdas is very wise. I'm sure you miss him as much as I do.
Yeah, yeah, and his singing of show tunes. Um, yeah,
And
Krishna show tunes.
Broadway. It's
Hmm. Yeah,
Sanskrit top 10.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well,
Well, that was,
I think that's a maybe. How do you feel? Maybe that's a good place for us to kind of
I think so.
compartmentalize this.
Clearly, starting maybe in our next session, we're going to be getting into some specifics. What are
Exactly.
the tools of transformation that the Gita has to offer, and how
Hmm.
can we put them to best use?
Yeah. All right. And see you in the next video, everyone.